My name is Glazed Painting. I'm the director of the Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilisations. And before I introduce Professor Mutaheda, I would like to advertise this one, Figures and Animals, Sculptures from the Medieval and Modern Iranian World, tomorrow at 6 o'clock at the same place. And it's Dr. Enamel, Culinary Department of Islamic Arts from the Louvre in Paris. Roy Mutaheda is the Gurney Professor of History at Harvard University. Professor Mutaheda has served as Director of the Center for Middle Eastern Studies and has also been the Director of the Prince Walid bin Talal Islamic Studies program at Harvard. Roy, if I may, is a learned scholar specialized in the field of social and intellectual history of Islam, Middle East and Iran. His books, Loyalty and Leadership in Early Islamic Societies, and Lessons in Islamic Jurisprudence, even if the latter one is translations, are certainly very important. But to me, and I think a generation of scholars, Professor Mutaheda's The Mantle of the Prophet, a study of contemporary Iran built on first-hand accounts, the story of a young mullah and his life, a story told also reviewing more or less the history of Iran for more than a millennium, is not only informing us about Iran and developments in history. What makes it a significant scholarly contribution, reprinted many times, is the novel, innovative way of analyzing history, the knitting of an individual's destiny into 2 millennium of history. Probably the most longest sentence I ever said in English. Having said that, it is a pleasure and an honor to welcome Professor Mutaheda to ISMC. He will speak to us under the heading Medieval Kashan, Crossroads, Commerce and Culture. So let us all warmly welcome Roy Mutaheda back to
To open my talk, I want to show a picture of a 5-year-old boy born in 1901, my father, the little fellow in the center there. I have no idea who the other 8 people are, nor the infant over here on the left, but they were apparently taking a picture and they said to this cute little boy, come stand in the middle. So he had this picture. If anybody knows who these people are, I'd be delighted, to be informed. This at least explains my interest in Kashan. Sorry. Thank you. Is that recording now? Yeah. No city history of Kashan survives from the Middle Ages, and it is possible that no such history was written. Kashan was rarely a seat of government, and most dynastic histories have only passing reference to it. While it is important to write the histories of large cities such as Cairo, Baghdad, Esfahan, it is equally important and somewhat more difficult to write the history of small cities like Kashan, for which textual evidence survives in many scattered sources, but in no central source. Given its importance as an artisanal center, the material evidence for the history of Kashan is considerable, but its interpretation can only be hinted at in the present lecture. Why is Kashan? That seems to be, okay. I thought there was a map here. Oh, yes, there is a map. Why is Kashan where it is? Kashan is here. Here's Kashan. This is a mountain range in central Iran, and the water flows from this mountain range, particularly from the spring of Feen, down an alluvial plain which ends here in this awful desert over here. This is the Kavir. It's a salt desert, very inhospitable to life of any kind whatsoever. So Kashan is midway between the mountains and the plain, and it is the center of a whole network of what Persians call qanat or qaris. An elaborate system of underground water channels distributes water from these springs and streams in the foothills of these mountains to farms and towns on this alluvial plain. Kashan, more broadly viewed, is in the center of a network that may be at least 3,000 years old, and because we have very close by a 3rd millennium BC site called Seljuq, Tepe Seljuq in Persian. A geographer writing in Persian, Ibn Khordadbeh, a geographer writing in Persian in this early period mentions the importance of the area, but without mentioning the city. In fact, the earliest geographers of the 3rd century of the Hijra, or 9th century, do not mention Kashan at all, and it probably is largely of Islamic creation. This, now here in a Persian geographer of the, as you see, of 372 of the Hijra, says Kashan Shahris Besyar Ne'mat Ve Tazianand Besyar و از آنجا دبیران و ادیبان بسیار خیزند. Then he goes on to make a remark about the scorpions of Kashan, very famous. And my father, to the end of his life, used to shake his shoe before he put it on in the morning, because he was taught in Kashan that there might be a scorpion in your shoe. The city first emerges as a site to which proto-Shiites, I should say, Arabs flee from Iraq. One of the first references is in the reign of the ferocious Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. Some Arabs from Iraq fled from the Al-Ash'ari tribe to Kashan, in particular one Al-Mutrif ibn al-Mughira, and they settled in both Qom and Kashan. Both places have Arabs of the Ash'ari tribe. Tabari may have an early reference. The story about them fleeing is in Tabari, and this may be the earliest reference to Kashan, if it is not there, because it is customary to say Kashan after you say Qom. The growth of Shiite orientation in Kashan during the 9th and 10th century remained, Twelver Shi'ism remained the dominant form of religion in among Muslims in the Kashan area, although there were many Zoroastrians nearby in villages. And it continued, and the villages nearby, as they converted to Islam, continued to be Sunni, strangely. Kashan, like several other central Iranian cities, changed hands from time to time until the Shiite dynasty of the Buyids took control of Iran in the mid-4th or 10th century of the Common Era. The Buyids showed favor to Qom because of its Shiite orientation, and did so as well to nearby Kashan until the conquest of central Iran by the Ghaznavids, who were, of course, fiercely Sunni in the mid-5th or 11th century. It is no secret that Shiites favor sayyids, so many descendants of Ali emigrated to Shiite cities such as Kashan. The subsequent conquest of Kashan by the Seljuqs in 443 or 1051 of the Common Era ushered a long period of prosperity for the people of Kashan. This is remarkable because everybody talks about the Seljuq period as the Sunni revival, but the Sunni revival didn't take in the same vigor in every place. During the Seljuk period, Kashan became increasingly known for its Shiite adherents. Yaqut al-Hamawi, who's a very late Shiite, late geographer, but in the Seljuk period, writes, as you see, its people are all Imami Shi'is. By this time, Shi'ism was no longer proto-Shi'ism, and it was clearly formed. During the Seljuk period, the city flourished in part for economic and in part for political reasons. One of the political reasons is the success of people from Kashan and its surrounding districts in acquiring positions in the Seljuk bureaucracy. A Kashani clerk of the very late Seljuk period, Muhammad ibn Ali al-Rawandi, writes in Rahat al-Sudur, a very important, interesting chronicle about Seljuk history, quote, holders of senior positions such as vizier, oh, maybe I have this on slide. Yes, I do. Holders of senior positions such as vizier and chief treasurer, and the majority of clerks in the government of the Sultan were Kashis. He's talking about under the Great Seljuks. Our origin and place of birth has been the district of Kashan in western Iran. Whenever they see good handwriting, he writes Iraq, interesting, because this is Iraq Ajami. So this is Iraq stands for Western Iran. The excellence perceived, whenever they see good handwriting, they say, this is the hand of a Kashani. The excellence perceived in Kashan, often shortened to Kashi, administrators, in large part came from their excellent education, which included calligraphy. Scholarly excellence, of course, can be a useful defense against charges of heresy, which Shi'is encountered frequently in the pre-Safavid era. The Seljuk period was the golden age for the founding of madrasas, or seminaries, throughout Iran, and in Kashan several such schools were established. Safiuddin Abu Tahir Ismail al-Kashi was a high clerk in the service of Malik Shah, who reigned in the 5th century, dying in 1092 of the Common Era, whose famous vizier, Nizam al-Mulk, hated everything Shiite. Safiuddin founded the Safiya Madrasa, along with a worthy library in his native Kashan. In spite of his known Shiite adherents, Safiuddin was granted great favor in the Seljuk court. His nephew, Muhtasul Muluk, Mu'inuddin Ahmad ibn Abdullah al-Kashi, who was a high official as well, founded another much frequented madrasa in Kashan. This madrasa was still functioning several centuries later in the 9th Hijri or 15th Common Era century. Another madrasa of the Seljuk era was the Aziziyah, founded in the second half of the 6th or 12th century by yet another vizier to the Seljuks, Azizuddin ibn Rabi'uddin As'ad al-Kashani, a vizier to the Sultan Toghrul ibn Arslan. Oh, there's his name. Yeah, sure. The Nasa'im al-Ashar says of him, he was one of the heads of department who were extremely skilled and was master among the scribes of financial administration for two Iraqs. The two Iraqs, that means both Iraq and Western Iran. End of quote. Not surprisingly, the curriculum of the madrasa involved deep study of varieties of accounting, istifa. Mustafi, as you know, is the word for treasurer used in the Seljuk period, istifa, as well as, quote, multiplication, division, algebra, and other forms, ashkal, I'm not quite sure how to translate, to be understood through mathematics. Nizam, end quote. Nizam al-Mulk was fully aware that these well-educated Shi'i clerks, with their excellent handwriting and competence in accounting, were penetrating the Seljuq bureaucracy. In the Siyasat Valmeh, he writes, in the days of Mahmud, Mas'ud, Toghrul, and Alp Arslan, those are the Mahmud is Mahmud of Ghazna, but the other three are the first three Seljuk sultans. May God have mercy on them. No Zoroastrian or Jew or Rafidi, that means Shiite, would have had the audacity to appear in a public place or to present himself before a great man. Those who administered the offices of the Turks were all professional civil servants and secretaries from Khorasan. Not only is there a Sunni angle to this, but there's a Khorasanian angle to it too. Who belonged to the Orthodox, he uses the word Qawim, Orthodox Hanafi and Shafi'i sects. The heretics of Iraq, that means Western Iran, were never admitted as secretaries and tax collectors. In fact, the Turks never used to employ them at all. They said, these men are of the same religion as the Daylamis, that's the Buyids, the Shiite predecessors of the Seljuks. Now things have reached such a stage that the court and the divan are full of them, meaning Shiites, and every Turk has 10 or 20 of these individuals running after him, and their object is to prevent even a few Khorasanis from entering the service of the court and earning a living there. In former times, if a man offered himself for service to a Turk or an administrator or in any other capacity, and said that he was of the Hanafi and Shafi'i sect and from a Sunni city, he was accepted. But if he said he was a Shiite from Qom, Kashan, or Ave, he was refused and told, "Be gone, we kill snakes, not nourish them." The Twelver Shiite scholar, Abdul Jalil Qazvini, writing circa 560 of the Hijra, or 1165, in a long, rambling book called Kitab al-Nagz in Persian. I've never managed to read it through. It's such a strange book. It is long. It gives a picture partially complementary to that of Nizam al-Mulk. Qazvini devotes a passage to Kashan, its excellent schools, all four of which he mentions. He also mentions that the judges in Kashan were Shiite, which is extremely interesting. I expect that was so because only a Shiite could command obedience in such a solidly Shiite town. He refers to the benefactions of Majduddin, to whom we will speak much more later, to the magnificent shrine of Ali, son of Muhammad al-Baqir, one of the Shiite imams. The success of Kashani bureaucrats in the late Seljuk administration is well illustrated by the career of Anushirwan ibn Khalid, or Anushirvan, if you want to say it in Kurdish, founder of the Sharafiya Madrasa. Anushirvan, supposedly a descendant of one of the Sasanian monarchs, and his name indicates, was one of the clerks who worked for the staunchly Sunni vizier Nizam al-Mulk, quoted above, despite the vizier's extreme disdain for such people. He was especially close to Nizam al-Mulk's son, Muayyid al-Mulk, who was vizier to the Seljuk Sultan Barkyaruk, who reigned from 485 to 498 of the Hijra. Anushirvan was, for a time, treasurer in the capital in Esfahan. Subsequently, another son of Nizam al-Mulk put him in charge of the budget of the army. Under the last Seljuk, the great Seljuk, Sultan Mahmud, he was appointed vizier. But under this greatly enfeebled Seljuk Sultan, Anushirvan could accomplish little. Quite amazingly, this Shiite clerk was then appointed vizier to the Abbasid Caliph. The Abbasid Caliph is the symbol of Sunni legitimacy. and he served in that capacity for a year. There had been crypto Shiites to the viziers to the Abbasid Caliph before, like the Banu Furat, if anybody remembers the reign of al-Muqtadir. But Anushirvan's Shi'ism was no secret. Anushirvan died in Baghdad in 533 or 1139 and was buried in the nearby tomb of Ali in Najaf. Beside a madrasa and a library, he gave important benefactions to Kashan, such as a hospital, interestingly called Dar al-Shifa here instead of Maristan, and a caravanserai. Two families of Kashani scholars of the Seljuq period have the place name Rawandi. Rawand is a small town a few miles from Kashan. One family is the Hanafi family, related to Muhammad ibn Ali al-Rawandi, whom I quoted above, wrote the Rahat al-Sudur. A second family, who were sayyids and Shi'is, included the very wealthy Majduddin Rawandi, to whom I briefly referred. He has a nephew, his nephew was Anushirvan ibn Khalid, another member of the Shi'i family, is closely related, is Diya-ad-Din Abu Rida Fadlallah. He was the director of this madrasa and a prolific poet in Arabic, whom Qazvini praised as a teacher, quote, without rival in all the lands of Islam for his knowledge and religious devotion, end quote. Diya-ad-Din's Diwan is filled with references to the contemporaries and to Kashan. It took me at least 3 weeks, maybe a month to read this diwan. It's very difficult. This is the kind of diwan somebody writes who doesn't speak Arabic natively, and it's memorized, al-Mubarrad and Fadaliyat and everything like that. Anyway, so it's full of difficult references. Diya-ad-Din writes of his relative Majduddin, the wealthy relative, that he, quote, he founded schools, madaris, and caravanserais, khanat, and hospitals, Maristan. Now it's used the word Maristan. In another poem, Diya-ad-Din also praises his relative for building mosques, water channels, and aqueducts, qanatir, which is interesting. Perhaps the most dramatic of Diya-ad-Din's poems is his description of the siege of Kashan in 532. The poem, that's 1137 of the Common Era. The poem offers the name of 40 nearby towns and villages which were sacked by the besiegers, but praises Majduddin for paying 40,000 dinars, it's gold coin, to lift the siege of Kashan to the besiegers. Shortly after this period, however, Kashan was sacked by the Khwarazm Shahs, who were extremely bad people, in 595. The list of those praised in the Diwan of Diya-ad-Din includes, incidentally, Qiwam-ad-Din, evidence of the connection of these learned men in Kashan with people of other regions. For example, there is a poem in praise of Qiwam-ad-Din, Abul Qasim al-Nasir ibn Ali, delivered in his vizierial palace in Esfahan. Diya-ad-Din wrote a poem to Qiwam on his visit to Kashan and an elegy on his death. As far as we know, Qiwam-ad-Din was a crypto-Nizari Ismaili. And in fact, my student Shafiq Virani in his book shows that there were some Ismailis in Kashan, though Twelvers were dominant. Kashan was, of course, a major center of ceramic production. The Seljuq period saw the rise of Kashan in this respect. Al-Muqaddasi, writing much earlier, that is in 380 of the Hijra or 990 AD, twice mentions Kashan and praises its long-necked bottles. I'm not sure exactly where the ceramic glass, I don't know. Kumkuma is the finger. I don't. By the time of, I've looked it up in lots of medieval dictionaries and everything, I'm not clear what it is, but anyway. By the time of Yaqut, the pottery and dishes, rada'ir, from Kashan were famous. A generation later, oh, I skipped ahead. How did I do that? A generation later, here's where I'm sorry. Not very good at mechanical things. A generation later, Zakaria al-Qazwini, who died in 682 of the Hijra, or 1283, writes, "From Kashan come shiny instruments, pottery utensils, alat. They, the Kashanis, have an outstanding gift which other lands do not have. The utensils, alat and zuruf, this is in Persian, no, it's in Arabic, sorry. Zuruf from Kashan are transported from Kashan to other lands. Pottery is both heavy and breakable. To export it, it must be of high artistic standard and strong fabric. Here are examples of the two styles of Kashani pottery cultivated in the Middle Ages. This one, attributed to Abu Zayd, of whom I'll talk later, is what is called Mina'i, or in Persian it's called half-drang, actually. It's 7 colors. It's a kind of enamel on pottery, but the pottery is a very strong fabric. On the right is the famous lusterware of Kashan, and this is a bowl in the metropolitan 13th century. And the famous, both of these techniques were done by the same families. The earliest dated enamel over glazed painting, this Mina'i, probably coincided with the invention of this technique in Kashan. The decorative patterns in illustrative painting was of such high quality that this pottery is widely regarded as a predecessor or a relative of miniature painting in books, which emerged about the same time. It may be that in the 12th and 13th centuries, and that the term Qashi, because Kashan was spelled with a qaf in medieval books, Qashi instead of Kashi, meant, quote, things belonging to Kashan, passed into many Arabic dialects, meaning tiles. Some of the ingredients of Kashan pottery were to be found nearby, and I will skip that. Signed works by 4 generations of Kashani potters. That's beautiful. Lusterware plate by Abu Zayd al-Kashani. And there's a wonderful article by Eddinghausen interpreting the lady dreaming below everything. Anyway, signed works by 4 generations of Kashani family. We have treatises on the method of composition of these, one written by one of the potter's families. This is Abu Qasim Abdullah al-Qashi. He wrote the book Ara'is al-Jawahir and Nafa'is al-Tayyib. Oh, well, it's in Persian, I guess, so I slipped into the wrong translation. Sorry, apologies. Written circa 700 or 1300 of the Common Era. Although Abu Qasim's book is partly taken from earlier books on stones and gems, a genre which goes back to Aristotle, but is also used by Nasir ad-Din Tusi and the less known Jauhari, a very interesting treatise, discusses also the manufacture of ceramics. Abul Qasim wrote a history of an ill-Khanid ruler, and his brother wrote a treatise on Sufism, all of which testifies to the high literary talents of this later members of this family who made their money entirely through pottery. The family had clearly prospered and benefited from education available in Kashan to rise to become authors and scholars. In the nearby town of Khohrud, we have the last recorded member of the Abu Tahir family. I showed you a piece by Abu Tahir, who signs, "This is the work of Yusuf ibn Ali ibn Muhammad, the Kashani potter, al-Ghadairi al-Kashani." This is not in luster, but in blue and white. And the technique that would soon dominate, and particularly after the coming of the Timurids, blue and white tiles. Thanks to this and similar signatures, we can distinguish 4 different families of potters, and at least 7 other potters, and at least 7 other individual potters. Sorry. Oh, well, this is a Shiite tile. This gentleman had a dream that Ali came to him in his sleep, and Ali's steed left a hoof print near his bedside, and he had it memorialized in a tile. This is a scene from the Shahnameh. This is Bahram Gouj, and there's the princess alive on the back of Bahram Gouj, and Azadeh trampled below by a camel. It's a long story. Anyway, this shows that there were many secular themes used as well as religious themes. Significantly, some of the tiles begin to spell Kashan with a kaf, not a qaf, as it had been spelled earlier. And one tile actually says, "Made in the place, maqam, of Kashan, may God protect it from the accidents of time, hawadith al-zaman." The Kashani pride in calligraphy is reflected in the numerous inscriptions in which the potteries say, written in his own hand. After giving their name, they say, "Bikhatihi," written in his own hand. This is a lovely Kashan luster piece. The luster fades into brown as it gets old, but it was luster. And that's somebody teaching calligraphy in the center. And there are all the students, Kashani students around him, copying what he writes on his blackboard. The earliest dated Kashan lusterware is from 575 or 1179. The latest piece is from 739 of the Hijra or 1339. We have a tile that reads, "It was written in the place of Kashan in 1337, in 738, 1337, in the workshop." Here it says Karkhane, which is extremely interesting. Karkhane of the Sayyid of Sayyids, Sayyid Ruknuddin Muhammad, son of the late Sayyid Zainuddin Ali, the potter, the Ghadairi. The work of the revered and respected master, Ostad, Jamal, the designer, Naqash. A designer can also be understood to mean painter. I thought I had an illustration this time. It can also mean painter, and it tells us the importance of the different functions carried out in the workshop. Karkhane, you have somebody who make the fabric of the pottery, you have somebody who paint, etc., etc. Under the Ilkhanids, Kashan did not suffer sack and pillage as had nearby cities like Esfahan. This gave smaller cities like Kashan a temporary advantage, not lasting, because Isfahan revived pretty fast. But meanwhile, the Kashanis had an advantage. While trade in lusterware pottery continued, Kashan came increasingly to be the center of other manufactures. Already in the era of brown luster and blue pottery, Kashan was a major producer of star and cross tiles used in architectural ornament. The Pax Mongolica favored trade, and Kashan benefited from its location on several trade routes. Until the 19th century, it was the important stop on the route from Ray or Tehran to Esfahan. As you can see, the railroad still runs through Kashan from Tehran to Esfahan in the middle of Esfahan Seljuq. It was also an important stop on the route from Khorasan to the Persian Gulf or southwestern Iran, the province of Fars. It was a stop on the route from Yazd to Ray. Yazd should be down here somewhere. Never mind. There it is. Yazd, under Agakon. Etc. It was an important center of routes. The Pax Mongolica attracted European merchants such as Marco Polo. Marco Polo, who seems to have stayed at a nearby Zoroastrian town, famous for its Zoroastrian population, Gabrabon. Gabra is the word for Zoroastrian. Gabrabon says that only one of the three wise men came from Kashan, but the later, slightly later, Friar Odoric of Pordenone, who in approximately 1320, quote, halted at the city of the three magi, which is called Kashan, a royal city of great repute, has all of them from Kashan. Another traveler of the late Ilkhanid period is Ibn Battuta, the Moroccan, who reports seeing what he calls Kashani tiles on madrasas and Sufi convents, as well as on the shrine of Ali in Najaf and the central bath in Esfahan. He compares these tiles to the faience tiles of North Africa, the famous Zalij or Zulej, from which Azuelos comes, people who know about Spanish pottery. In the post-Mongol period, Nasiruddin al-Kirmani, who flourished around 725 of the Hijra or 1325 of the Common Era, in his history of the period, mentions that Abu Tahir Safi ad-Din Ismail, who held Kashan as a kind of fief, soyurghal, this is a post-Mongolian word for fief, showed kindness, quote, to the members of ancient houses, buyutat qadim. This is extremely interesting and very characteristic of Persian Iranian city histories, is this business about ancient houses. Presumably these were descendants of long-term Iranian landholders and Arab elites such as these sayyid families who I talked about. Nearby Kashan are many tomb shrines. Just as the landscape had been sacralized by Zoroastrians before the coming of Islam, and a Chahar Tagh fire temple survives nearby, the presence of Shiʿism and Sufism resacralized both the town of Kashan and the landscape around it, particularly in the 12th through 16th century. This is the tomb of Baba Afzal al-Kashani, a very prominent figure in the Sufi philosophical tradition, and a gifted poet, some of whose quatrains were later ascribed to Omar Khayyam. His tomb, with its handsome conical tower, is in a nearby village called Maragh. Hostility between Shiİsm and Sufism Twelver Shi'ism and Sufism was not evident in Kashan in pre-Safavid times. It's really interesting that it's the Safavid period in which there's some kind of hostility between the two. Tomb shrines of descendants of the Prophet, in Persian called Imamzades, have always been numerous in the Kashan area because of the city's fidelity to Shi'ism. The most prominent of these is in a nearby town called Ardahal, where, as mentioned above, Ali, son of the Shiite Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, is buried. It's interesting. I mean, Qom is a daughter of one of the Imams, and this is a son of one of the Imams. It's interesting that this became very big regionally, but Qom became bigger internationally as a 12er Shiite shrine. Anyway, amazingly, a widely prevalent non-Islamic custom is attached to this shrine. Although one of the Persian encyclopedias says this is a total fabrication of modern people. But anyway, on the second Friday of the Persian month of Mehr, that's not a Shiite, not an Islamic reckoning. The second Friday of the Shiite month of Mehr, the ceremony of carpet washing, Qali Shuyan, is in a healing spring, takes place, now associated with the story of Sultan Ali, who is buried there. The non-Islamic date suggests that this widely celebrated festival is pre-Islamic and associated with a Zoroastrian festival of Tirgan, in which water is central. The eruption of Timur, Tamerlane, dramatically changed the dynastic landscape of Iran. Kashan submitted to Timur and was not harmed, in spite of Timur's horrendous slaughter of the inhabitants of nearby Esfahan. After Timur's death, his enlightened successors drew on Kashani tradition for the blue and white tile work, which is such an important feature of Timurid architecture. Timur's grandson, Ulugh Beg, reached out to Kashan for mathematicians and astronomers. The existence of such mathematically gifted and talented Kashanis is at least in part due to the curriculum of the madrasa that I mentioned above. A highly respected author, the most judgely of judges, Aqda al-Qudat, whatever that means, Imad-ud-Din Yahya ibn Ahmad al-Kashi, or Kashi, who died in 766 or 1364 of the Common Era, wrote several treatises on mathematics, and his descendants continued this tradition. The benefit of mathematical knowledge should be evident to medieval Kashanis who, like their neighbors in central Iran, had difficult problems of surveying, water distribution, tile design, and the like to figure out. The most famous of these mathematicians and astronomers was Ghias-ud-Din Jamshid al-Kashani. Interesting, he's named Jamshid. That's worth some thought. He was probably the most brilliant, well, one of the most brilliant medieval mathematicians anywhere in the medieval Middle East. He studied in the Madrasa Khan, founded by Sayyid Latif ibn Ruknuddin, a fifth generation descendant of the poet Diya-ad-Din Ravandi, whose diwan I faintly praised before. In the madrasa, quote, the rational sciences, including mathematics and astronomy, were very much part of the curriculum. Jamshid was invited to Samarkand early in his career. There his patron was Timur's grandson, Ulugh Beg, great figure in Islamic cultural history, one of the most mathematically gifted rulers of the medieval world. An entire chapter of his treatise on calculation, Hisab, is devoted to calculating architectural problems, such as those of making muqarnas. It's a very interesting section, imperfectly exploited, I think, by art historians. Now I turn to the Turkoman period. After Timur's reign, Kashan fell under the control of Turkoman dynasties. Documents and inscriptions from Kashan of the Karakoyunlu age give us a great insight into the city in the 9th or 15th century. The foundation deed, Waqfnameh, of the Mir Imad Mosque, or Masjid-e-Maidan it's also called, is the longest of such documents. The surviving copy, it's fabulous because these Waqf documents were copied from generation to generation by legal people to make sure that they stayed in force. And we have all the testimonials of intermediate generations of copyists in this late copy. The surviving copy endows the mosque, a Sufi convent, Khanagah, or Khanagah, adjoining bathhouse, next to the school, Madraseh Khan, the school I mentioned, founded several generations earlier, with 2 of the 88 portions of the Qanat named Esfid Abad of the village of Fin. Fin is the great spring near Kashan. My father's earliest memory is having his feet in the water in Fin. And other properties, such as an oil press, a blacksmith shop, and a bakery. We get a real social history out of these Waqfnames. A fair amount of agricultural property, 111 jarib, jarib is a big measure, including farms, mazare, with accompanying water rights in Muhaddababad and Nasrabad are mentioned. These are villages nearby. The salary of the ulama and staff, right down to the sweeper, are specified. Very interesting stuff. As well as the stipends for the teachers, students, to be held in the school, to be held at the mosque. The students are to be examined every 6 months to see if they are worthy of their stipend. I don't know if the institute here has similar policy. Another such deed in 877 or 1473 of the Common Era gives an endowment of a khanqah opposite the mosque on its far side, facing, quote, a building for time and hour, zaman vaqt. It is to be the residence for the ulama, the poor, which means the Sufis probably, fuqara, the pious, and the pure. I have no idea who the pure are. The endower endows both the khanqah and the quasi-clock tower with both water rights and properties, quote, in the neighborhood of Kashan, some on the road to Bidgol. There is a mention of a hospital, Dar Shifa, as well as salaries and equipment for the astronomer named Fakhruddin Ali, who is to inhabit the quasi-clock tower. I would love to know more about this clock tower, but anyway, in medieval cities they had clock towers. By that time, that is the 15th century, the Venetian ambassador, Joseph Barbaro, to Uzun Hassan, visited Kashan. This is about 1470. The major export, he says, exports were textiles, which was my grandfather's business, as would remain the case until the 20th century. He writes, quote, we found a well-inhabited city called Kassan, he calls it Cassan, where for the most part they make silk and cotton in so great quantity that he who would spend 10,000 ducats in a day may find enough of that merchandise to spend it on, end quote. Other textiles included rugs, for which Kashan was famous, and felt, namad in Persian, which is mentioned frequently. I will skip the section on mints. Kashan was a mint from the Buyid period right up to the Safavids, and through the Safavid period. Rare but valuable information on tax income from Kashan appears in some sources. It is impossible to determine the buying power, the fineness of the metals in the coins mentioned, and the principles of tax collection. So all of this information I'm about to give you should be taken with many grains of salt. The history of Qom, which you will remember is composed in 378 of the Hijra, gives the estimated taxes for Kashan according to two different surveys as either 158,000 dirhams or 181,000 dirhams. Dirham is a silver coin, as you know. Ibn Khordadbeh gives the combined income of Kashan and Qom as 3 million dirhams, as compared in his geography, I should say, to Azerbaijan with an income of 4.5 million dirhams. Azerbaijan is a big, prosperous place, so this shows you that somebody was making money or something. Al-Muqaddasi, who is terribly careless with figures, gives the land tax of Kashan as 1 million dirhams. Oh, I don't know where that came from. 1 million dirhams. Sorry. Much more serious is the estimate of the learned polymath Hamdullah Mustafi, who gives an income for Kashan and its district of 170,000 dirhams, dinars, excuse me, which at a rate of 10 to 1, a common conversion thing, would make 1,170,000 dirhams. Shows that if the tax is being collected on the same basis, which it may not be, it was increasingly prosperous through time. Kashan emerged as a small city in part because of the shift of wealth occasioned by the Arab conquests. This is something we don't think about enough, I think, that the Arab conquests involved a great transfer of capital and wealth and land and everything like that. And as you know, very important places like Esfahan emerged from 3 large villages that existed before the Arab conquests and censorship. So there's a great shift of wealth occasioned by the Arab conquests. Arabs acquired capital during these conquests and created new cities and enlarged existing cities. Some of this, of course, is the foundation of garrison cities, the famous Amsar, but it's more to the story than that. They thereby expanded urban life in early Islamic Iran. The long period of stability between the Arab conquests and the Seljuq conquests, like 4.5 centuries, allowed cities to flourish, including Kashan, which in some sense was a new city. From the Seljuq period on, Iran had pastoral rulers who preferred to use marginal land for grazing rather than agriculture. When there was a strong central rule, as under the Ilkhanids, intercity trade could be very important to cities like Kashan with artisanal skills and resources. Kashan's comparative prosperity depended on its qanat-based agriculture. And I have a long paragraph which I cut out on all the things grown in Kashan. If anyone has to ask me, I'll tell them. It also depended on its important location on trade routes and, very significantly, its continually thriving artisanal traditions. It was fortunate to have many leaders and some rulers who invested in charitable trusts that supported valuable institutions such as schools. Their education enabled Kashanis to acquire patronage as bureaucrats and astronomers, who sometimes in turn patronized their home city of Kashan. Non-educational charitable institutions held together the social fabric of a society with widely disparate levels of income. The continuity of elites, reinforced in Kashan by the presence of sayyids, probably fostered stability and also probably stifled many talents who could not write because they weren't sayyids. Across turbulent centuries of change of regime, Kashan was considerably smaller than Esfahan and somewhat smaller than its Shiite neighbor Qom. Its small size sometimes, but not always, protected it from the ravages of invaders. Kashan remained a relatively robust civic and maintained a relatively robust civic and regional life from the 4th or 10th century of the Common Era through the 9th and 15th century of the Hijri to the 9th and 15th century of the Common Era. Thank you.
So we'll open up the floor for comments and questions. Okay, Mohammed.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation about Kashan. My interest is about the lusterware that was produced in Kashan, actually. Do we have any reference about whether the lusterware was originally, appeared in Kashan or it was imported from China?
Very, very interesting question. There was lusterware in Egypt.
That was my period. Other question, yeah. How it was,
in the Fatimid period, there was lusterware in Egypt. It wasn't applied to it was applied to, people use these words very loosely, faience and soft paste and so forth. It was applied to something a little bit less sturdy fabric than the pieces made. There is some inference, and it may well be true, that after Salahuddin conquered Egypt, that Fatimid potters may have scattered around the world and to places like Kashan. Maybe. We have no mention of it whatsoever. Now, there was also in Raqqa, there was also in Raqqa a whole school of lusterware painters.
But the technique was a little bit different.
Yeah, different. That's correct. It's not quite what the Kashani lusterware is. There certainly is descriptions in some of these books. These books on minerals and stones are so interesting, believe it or not. I have so much. Al-Jawahir wal-Jamahir. They are so interesting, and they have information about glazes on them, but it's very hard to make concrete connections. The Kashani went around and they sold a lot of stuff. They went all around the Islamic Near East and North Africa, perhaps a bit, and they did on commission many tomb tiles, as we hear, even the Pluto mentions, and so on and so forth. But it's very hard to make concrete connections. I think there probably was some, but I don't know. I can't.
Thank you. I was interested, you talked about two remarkable strands, the strand of the artisanal excellence,
right,
and the strand of what we would call academic excellence.
Right.
But I'm interested in well, in fact, it came out just now when you were talking about the book about jewels, the relationship between these two kinds of excellence.
Yes. Well, I mean, this Ara'is al-Jawahir, the book which I quoted, is by the grandson of one of the greatest Kashani potters. And the author, clearly knows all about the manufacture of these things, although he writes interestingly that Mina'i has died in his time. It's interesting. I'm willing to speculate about that. Their kind of chemistry was was written. Yes, they wrote down their kind of chemistry. I mean, it's ad hoc stuff, but there's a lot in these books to be learned. The other book we have, which is by a person I think from Nishapur called Jauhari, slightly earlier than this, has a lot of again a learned treatise on practical chemistry by a jeweler, Jauhari, and includes how to make fake jewels, but that's and clearly some of these people were well educated and set their thoughts down. Not enough. I would have liked more as an historian, but some, yes. There is a crossover. Thank you.
Sarah, and then Sarah.
Good. So my question is how unusual, if you think of all the cities of the Islamic world, how unusual is Kashan in terms of the record that you're able to excavate? I mean, if you were to try to guess, how many other cities could you write such a record for which there is not a major history already written?
It's difficult. It's difficult. There are a lot of, I don't know if to call them third tier places, and I think it's important to try to write their history. I would like, I had a little bit of, as I said, a little bit of material evidence, but if there were regular excavations in Kashan, we'd have a lot more. And I expect there, just in the Middle East for the medieval Islamic period, I count pre-1500 as medieval. I'm arbitrarily saying pre-1500 is medieval. Pre-1500, I would say, there were maybe a couple of thousand such cities, not necessarily that had the artisanal importance of Kashan. That was rather exceptional. And I think as time goes on and this field goes on, we will turn to those secondary cities because they're very interesting. They're not necessarily, as I said, these vaqf-namehs are fantastic. We get a lot of social history by the time we get a later part of Kashan. I think they're interesting. We have very few histories of secondary places. Fustat, we have a sort of history of medieval Fustat. That's really part of Cairo, though. I don't know. We don't have many histories of smaller places. But I think it's a frontier. I hope it's a frontier.
Well, thank you, Roy.
Yes.
Fascinating history. On the question of Shiites as viziers and administrators and so on, this seems to be a recurrent theme in many places. I mean, the late Abbasid times in Baghdad, they see various times in which the vizier was the notorious Ibn al-Alqami, who apparently is blamed by Sunnis for having surrendered Baghdad to the Mongols.
Yeah.
And then under the Mongol rule as well, there were many Shiite administrators. And then in India, Hyderabad and the various kingdoms in the south, often even when they had Sunni rulers, they had Shiite administrators.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just speculation. I'm just wondering whether there is any kind of explanation.
Well, what I suggested in the lecture that this is a minority's defense against the majority. I mean, the Shiites were never a majority except in places like Kashan. They were and Najaf, but they were never a majority. So excellence, competence was very important. Of course, for Twelver Shiites, they had buried their claim to the Imam, so they had no. But I think a lot of Sunni rulers understood these people have no living claim to political political power. They're
It's like
Imam
slaves.
is a Ghaib. So so it's really a question of I mean, they could be reliable servants of these regimes they served. Maybe more reliable because they had no living person to whom they could turn as more legitimate than their ruler.
Can I make an observation on something else?
Yeah.
Which is kumkum and kamakam
Yes.
that you mentioned.
Yes.
Well, as I know it, kumkum is a kind of metal vessel with
Yes,
a
that's
narrow
correct.
neck,
In later Arabic,
and it's used for sprinkling rose water.
Is a brass.
Yeah.
Glass long
Or
hand,
silver.
long.
Yeah.
Long ewer, brass ewer
Yes.
with a long
Right.
neck.
Yeah.
I've gone to the dictionaries, but the medieval dictionaries are not clear about it. They're just not. Yeah. I have in the essay form of this. I have the note to Lisan al-Arab and everything where I've looked up all the pom-pom.
Is it listed in Lisan al-Arab?
Yes. Yeah, pom-pom is listed. Yeah.
Isn't it like a bottle?
It is a bottle. It is a bottle. It's obviously for containing liquid. There's no question about that. Everybody agrees that it's for containing liquid.
With a sprinkler.
Yeah, the sprinkler. Yeah.
Thank you very much for very fascinating insight into a place almost ethnographic in scope as you presented it. I have two questions that go into that direction. One being more general, just because I don't know so much about the time and the era, and one being more specific to maybe some more ethnographic details about the city. You mentioned or commerce as part of your title, and I was just wondering how deep is the money economy in Kashan? Do we know anything about it? And how much does it encompass? Is everybody part of the money economy, or is it focused on traders coming in and out?
Very good question.
And the second, sorry.
The
second question, which is related. Or do you want to answer this?
Well, yes, if I could, yes. The trade taxes collected in kind, of course, that exists everywhere, and instead of in cash. Now, the trade was in the medieval Islamic world was very unpredictably taxed, because technically within Darul Islam there should be no taxes. And nevertheless, everybody saw that these traders were making lots of money. And the secondary reason for building walls around the city, and Kashan had walls after a certain point, was that at the gates of the city you would collect taxes from merchants. And these have various names. In Persian they're called Baj. Now, the Mongols famously instituted a tax. I don't know if you want this answer, but I'll give it to you. The Mongols.
As elaborate.
The Mongols introduced something called a tamra, which is a very important. Yeah, it's a stamp originally, and it was a very important tax on commerce, and it's only under the second or third Safavid ruler that they abolished it. And so all through this period, I mean, these later tax figures I give you all included probably tamra income. But I have no way to estimate it. Sometimes it's 5% value. In a lot of later cases, it's 5%, but it may have varied considerably. I'm sorry, I got off. So it's very hard to measure the cash economy. It's very hard to measure the cash economy. I think that in a place where there was a terrific amount of artisanal work and export, as in the case of Kashan, they probably had a fairly monetized economy, but I can't prove it.
So the
Second question
was kind of related. It is, you mentioned the four potters families, and you also mentioned houses as a social unit, and I was wondering, were these also, say, financial, commercial units, so acting and connected to that? Could you tell a little bit more about the social structure and how these family networks and houses were set up?
I wish I knew more. I mean, not we know a lot about the potters because they sign their pieces, but we don't have, except for this one treatise that has a section on making pottery by a Kashani, we don't have internal histories. Unfortunately, it would be fascinating. These families were predominantly sayyids from the signatures. We know that. They were. It was big business, and they went on commission to places, other places in the well, at least around Iran, perhaps beyond. Yes, they did. They went into the Caucasus. These potters on a commission and produced tiles for various locations, as I say, by the fourth generation, we have people who are adibs, they're literary people from these potter families, but I can't tell you more. I'm sorry, I just don't know.
Was there anything about the culinary arts in Kashan, and about drink and alcohol?
Alcohol?
Well, I mean, Rodi Mates.
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't. It's not that strange. Sorry, it's not that strange a question, really.
No. I'm trying to think now. One of the explanations for the placement of the design is that you have to drink down in the vessel until you can see all of the design. And certainly some of the secular themed ones I showed you have drinking scenes, sure, but I don't have any literary evidence. No.
Sorry to go back to the more boring tiling and pottery questions.
Yeah.
I've read in non-academic books the relationship between the name place Kashan and a similarly named place in China called Kashi. Is there any?
I don't know. There is a place in Central Asia named Kashan as well, and
it happens to be a center for ceramics also.
Yes, yeah, but I don't know that they have any relation. Yeah.
No, just on that note, because that is the city I do my research in. It's called locally Kashgar. In Chinese, it's because of the way the characters are made, it's turned into Kash. So the Kash is only in the transliteration.
Okay.
And I think in Arabic it's called Kashgar as well.
Kashgar, yes.
Kashgar,
yes.
Okay. There is room for more questions or comments.
As you know, perhaps because they were two Shiite places in what was a largely Sunni country, Persians now still say na homo na Kashan, meaning I don't want either of these things.
Okay, Mohammed, you'll get the last one then.
Sorry, just back to the last way and the names of these kind of families. Do
Yeah.
you believe they are families because there is a discussion, for example, about the Egyptian Dahan or Saadi? They are saying like they are kind of workshops that transform these kind of
That's correct.
Sana'a, generation after
absolutely
generation, but not family as such.
No, these are families. These are families. We have we really have good genealogical material to show they're related. Yeah, but we have very better histories for Qom than Kashan. Qom was a bigger place, and they include a lot of the information about Kashani people, which I used in this lecture. Yeah.
Okay, and I think, or I ask you all humbly to join me in thanking Professor Mutahid.
Cutting out parts, I'm not under an hour.